Welcome to your weekly astrological weather. This is your place to get practical guidance for not only surviving, but thriving with the cosmic tides.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to your weekly astrological weather. We are so happy that you've decided to join us here this week to get the scoop on what is happening astrologically and how you can best work with the energies. I'm so happy to be here for not her Astrology Hub podcast debut, but definitely weekly weather debut, business astrologer, and so much more, Georgia Stathis. And Georgia has done something very special for us this week. She has actually prepared a presentation to give you some visuals to go along with the weekly weather. So if you're listening on the podcast, we're going to do our best to describe the visuals. And if you're listening and you have the option to hop over to YouTube or our website, this would be a great week to do that. If not, we're going to still describe things and make it come to life visually for you as best as we can. And I just also wanted to mention that this is the way that the forecasts happen in the inner circle. Georgia's going to be one of our astrologers in the inner circle in 2023. And the inner circle members get the forecast in a very visual format and in a very teaching, like they're actually learning how to forecast, they're learning how to interpret energies as they're getting the forecast. So if that's interesting to you, make sure you get on the wait list for the inner circle. It's not open for enrollment right now. And this year, we're actually not going to open it until the equinox in March. So get on the wait list now, though, because we are going to give one last opportunity this year for wait list members to get into the inner circle, so that you don't have to wait so long if you've been waiting for the inner circle to open. So make sure you're on that wait list, astrologyhub.com/IC23. Also, coming up here very soon is our free 7th annual forecast event. So this is going to be a 2023 forecast featuring 13 different astrologers, all of their interpretations and perspectives on the year ahead and how to work with that. So if you are interested in joining, again, that's free. It's happening December 10th. And we're doing something new this year where the entire week after the forecast panel event, you're going to be getting personalized by zodiac sign input on 2023. So that's all part of the event. And you can go to astrologyhub.com/2023 forecast and register for that event now. Okay, so Georgia, let's dive into the week. If we're looking at from like an overall theme perspective,
yes,
what have you identified as the theme?
The theme, I think, especially now, is darkness into light. We're going from the last couple of degrees to Scorpio to the new moon in Sag and Mercury and Venus in Sag. We're going to be talking about that today. We're looking at Jupiter. We're going to talk about that today, going direct this week. I mean, it's also Thanksgiving, which is always, in America at least, where it's always good to be a little grateful, for what we do have. And so, I think the theme is darkness into light, clarity, more clarity. Still a few gray areas, shall we say, but more clarity, So with that said, and also on the slides, if we can we put the first slide up? There is a wonderful quote from André Gide on that first slide. And it's André Gide, and it says, "Sometimes you need to lose sight of the shore for a very long time before you discover new lands." And I think in a very small way, but maybe even in a big way, going from darkness into light, sometimes we have to be in darkness to find, or at least to appreciate when the light shows up. We've had a month of eclipses and they weren't easy, and they were quite phenomenal. And so the theme this week is moving from darkness into light. And I'd like to go to the first slide after this, because what I like to do with my students, and when I taught at Kepler, and I think this is kind of a neat thing to do, There was a wonderful writer, astrologer, Mark Edmund Jones, who wrote a book called Guide to Planetary Interpretation, or something like that. And he talked a lot about chart patterns and chart shapes. And sometimes they're a little hard to discern when you look at a horoscope, but sometimes they're very clear. And this week's charts from the 21st through the 27th all showed what we call a shape, a locomotive shape. And that basically what a locomotive is when planets are all lined up like a train. And that's why I have a little engine at the arrow, and a little caboose at the end, because the planets that are leading, that are rising, that are leading are going to be particularly lit up. And the locomotive, according to Mark Edmund Jones, is there's focus. There's the need to unearth the things that are confusing. And of course, with Mars still retrograde for quite a long time through mid-January, doesn't mean that when this week is over, the magic is going to happen, because that's not happening. But at least when the planets go into Sagittarius, there's a little bit more fire and a little bit, and that's what the locomotive is. It starts out the first 2 days, the 21st, 22nd, the moon is actually leading. So the week may start out fairly emotional, which would make total sense since the sun is trying to finish its leg in Scorpio. Scorpio is a water sign, deep water sign. It gets emotional, doesn't talk about it, but it gets, it's water. But by the time the sun moves into Sagittarius, which will happen Tuesday, then the sun is leading pretty much all week long, actually for a few more weeks. And that means there's more light. That's the whole point that I was making. The thing that I kind of like, but I was still a little confused about on this shape, is that the caboose, by the way, astrologers don't call it the caboose. That's just something I do. Okay, so it's nothing in terms in a book that you'll find. But the caboose is always the part that you can't see. And in this particular shape, the caboose is Mars, but Mars is retrograde. And so what this could very likely be is what a lot of you have been experiencing in the last few weeks, especially the last 2 weeks, is Mars is retrograde. Mars is about getting things done. It's about getting on task. It's about getting focused. But every couple of years when Mars goes retrograde, and I'm sure a lot of the other astrologers who've been doing weekly weather will be talking about this or have been talking about it. Every time that happens, it's like shooting an arrow towards the target, but every time you shoot, you get off center. So it's very easy with a Mars retrograde, not even talking about the fact that it's in Gemini, which is even more distracting, to get off target. And with Mars for the last few weeks, with Neptune, it could be frustrating because it feels like every time you go to do something, it's like water, it goes through your hands. But the good news about this is that it's not going to be, this is my personal opinion, as much as an imposition, shall we say, on your life as it might have been in this last month, because now we have a lot of planets going into Sagittarius, which lightens up the energy. It makes it a little bit more, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is a really positive planet. It can be a little overindulgent, I have to say that, but it's also very progressive and it's very protective. That's what one of my old teachers used to say, Jupiter protects. So personally, I think even though there's a lot of craziness in the world right now, and Jupiter is doing a number this week, which is really good, I think there is some protection we're seeing here, some uncovering of information, shall we say, that we have not seen. So we have a lot of moving parts moved by external sources. We know that from the elections, from the world situation. Problems may seem unfixable, but if you can just make a list of 2 or 3 things a day this week, and maybe know that maybe you get one done, that's a good day. So with that said, let's go over to the next slide. So thank you. So the themes for the week, what I did is I went through and I made a list of some of the big themes for the week, since we just have a few minutes today. And one of the things that's happening on Monday is, and this happens maybe about every 2 or 3 months, is Mercury and Venus, because one of the things we should know as astrologers is Mercury and Venus are the 2 planets that never fly too far from the sun. So you're usually going to see Mercury, you're always going to see Mercury and Venus hanging around the sun in some way. So, but every couple 3 months, Mercury and Venus will come together. And if you just think about the energy of the archetypes, Mercury is chatty Cathy. Okay. I want to talk. I want to explore. I'm curious. I want to, study. I want to read. I want to write. I want to watch media, And then we have Venus. Venus has a lot to do with what you desire, what you want. Okay. You want a lot of information. That's what this week is about. I want to find out information once darkness starts to go into light about things that I've not been able to get any information on. This could be as simple as you've been waiting for your driver's license to show up from the DMV, and after 3 weeks, they finally sent it. It's that kind of a week, all right? And it's at 7 degrees of Sagittarius, which is in the first 10 degrees of Sag, which is the real energy of Sag, which also would suggest that if you are, and there are times we know, especially during the holidays, and we do have Thanksgiving this week in America, when we get together with our family, and in the last few years, the political situation has been on and off, as we all know, is to not get into dart throwing. Sagittarius is the dart, okay? And actually, if you look at the constellation of Sagittarius and the sky that's on the zodiac, the point of that arrow, the dart of Sagittarius, is actually pointing towards the heart of Scorpio, the scorpion, Antares. And so the thing we don't want to do, especially if we're drinking a little bit much, which we might be doing this week because Mars is squaring Neptune and everybody just wants to have a good time, is to install an emotional chip before you go to dinner. Because this is very blunt. Mercury and Venus can be very, very blunt. And blunt is good but sometimes blunt can hurt. Okay. On Tuesday, the sun finally leaves the darkness period of Scorpio and goes into tropical Sagittarius at 0 degrees. And then this is the other thing. The first few days of the week before we get to Wednesday, we are in the dark of the moon also, which is the last quarter phase of the moon, or actually it's the balsamic phase of the moon, where a lot of people don't think a lot of things are going on, but in the balsamic phase, we've been incubating and fermenting ideas. So that when the new moon shows up on Wednesday at 2 degrees of Sagittarius, new moons are always about new beginnings. They're not educated enough to have enough knowledge, but they are about fresh new beginnings. And what I did in the next slide, but we're not there yet, we'll talk about these Sabian symbols. They're actually Sabian symbols with little stories that go around with each degree of the zodiac. And we'll do that in the next slide. But what I'm also looking at is Wednesday. My heart is panting for Wednesday because that's the day, finally, God help us, that Jupiter is going to go direct after all these months at late Pisces. And every year Jupiter goes direct. Jupiter spends about a year in every sign of the zodiac. But if you think in terms of the more holistic zodiac, the last sign of the zodiac is also Pisces. So even though Jupiter, which comes back every 12 years, is finishing its 1 year in Pisces, in many ways, it's also finishing a 12-year cycle because it's at the end of the zodiac. And this is going to be very, very important. And I'll be showing you why in a moment. And then, of course, the thing that we have to be somewhat cognitive about, and I know a lot of people who are watching this may not be that advanced in astrology, but that's okay. Because I'm going to show you an illustration. The 3 out of the 10 planets in the sky, I'm not counting the asteroids, I'm not counting Chiron, which I love, I'm just talking about the basic 10. 3 out of 10 planets, think about that, that's almost a third of the planets in the sky, are what we call out of bounds. And this doesn't happen all the time. It has to either be Sagittarius or Capricorn or Gemini or Cancer. This is when things will often go out of, certain planets will go out of bounds. And when planets are out of bounds, they're out of reach. So there's a lot going on that we don't see. And so again, in terms of conversations with other people, negotiations with other people, think before you act. That's going to be very important this week. And it's always a good idea, if you're not getting all the information that you feel you should be getting, you simply say, look, this is great. That's a good Sagittarius response. But let me think about it. That's always a good thing to do anyway when Mars is going retrograde, because you need to be a little strategic when Mars is going retrograde, because it's not easy to be strategic. So with these points of the week highlighted on this list, let's go to the next slide and let's talk about this first adventure. Okay, so Wednesday's new moon, November 23rd, is at 2 degrees of Sagittarius. And you know, many people have written this Sabian symbols. Many people have gone through and done their own interpretations of the Sabian symbols, but I just took 3 sources from our library, and I gave the names of the authors, and they're all very similar, which is very interesting. The last one on this list, Lane Beauvais, I don't know him or her, but I really liked what they said about the Sabian symbols. So let's go through this. This is a new moon, new beginnings, new starts. Remember, new moons are different than full moons. The new moon doesn't always have a lot of experience, and a new moon is always when you take more risks because you don't have the experience. Okay, so this is the symbol, 2 degrees Sag, from Dana Rudyard. White-capped waves display the power of wind over sea. Or, in the quote from him is, the mobilization of unconscious energies under the pressure of super personal motivations. And that really sounds like this election season we've just been coming out of, you know. White-capped waves, what does that say to you? Wind over sea. Wind is air. Sea is water. I mean, look at Florida. I mean, I'm a resident of Florida half the time, and we've had our share down there. I mean, the wind is pretty powerful. So wind is ideas. Sea is emotion. Air is ideas. Sea is emotion. Linda Hill, who's down in was in Australia, wrote, "The ocean covered with whitecaps. Wind is moving the water." This is interesting. I think that's an interesting comment, because wind, air moves the water. Moon could be the people. The water's the people. Media moves people. So, you know, be mindful of the media you're watching. Not just today or this week, but always. That's a good point. Wind, air, communications can disturb. Blaine Beauvais, the tips of the iceberg, the tendency for things to remain hidden. So, you know, I mean, early Sagittarius, it's curious. Ask questions. Do a little bit more of a dance when you ask your questions, and ask the questions. You know, I think it's always a very good idea whenever we're dealing with either our personal relationships or our professional relationships, to just ask without malice a direct question to someone. And if the response is true, you'll know that. And if the response is not true, you'll also know that. But never ask a question with malice. And that is a key, I think, for this week, especially as we're going into this holiday season with our families and our friends. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. Now, I thought this was sort of fun because, you know, every, I don't know, 15 years or every 20 years, you get a thing in a newspaper saying, oh, we have discovered the 13th sign of the zodiac. I mean, if you've lived long enough, you'll see this it rolls out. Okay, and for those who don't understand what this is, I thought this would be a fun thing. What I've done is by the way, I've taken these off the internet. They're not mine. I've borrowed them just for educational purposes. I'm just being really clear. And what you're seeing is across where the blue stars are, whatever those little symbols are, that's the zodiacal ring, okay? And on the left, on the lower left, on the first one, you'll see Sagittarius, whose wing is just on the zodiac. And then on the far right, you're going to see the claws of Scorpion, which used to be Libra, by the way, and that's a whole nother class. But you see a leg coming in the middle, and that's Ophiuchus. And I've always been fascinated by Ophiuchus, and I actually remember a story when I was first learning astrology in the early 70s from my teacher. She was pretty profound. And she said something to me that I don't remember a lot of what she said, but she said, there's something about people born in the first few days of tropical Sagittarius that is a very different energy than people born during the rest of that month. And what it is there's more of an ability to heal people with their hands and with their words. And I always remembered that. And I do remember in the early 70s that I had a friend of mine who was born I've actually have a lot of friends that are born in this week. And this particular person had trained to be a lawyer. I remember him, Mike was his name. And he had decided in early 70s that he was going to be a nurse. And he was born in the first week of November. So anyway, I wanted to show him the man with the snakes. Now, who is the man with the snakes? All right. Is he he is Hercules, but is he Hercules who subdues the deadly compulsive Hydra, which is very scorpionic, by containing his feelings and staying on task? Or is he baby Hercules? Because in the mythologies, Hera did not want Hercules to live because he was half mortal and half god. He was Zeus's son. And she tried to kill him when he was a baby because she knew because he was half mortal and half god that he would be able to have tremendous power on both realms. And so she tried to kill him. And so when he was a baby, she sent 2 snakes to kill him while in his crib. And what happened in many of the stories is the nurse is hearing all these wrangles and she goes in and there's baby Hercules has killed the 2 snakes and he's playing with them. That's one of the stories. And I always think it's interesting. It's 2 snakes because if you look at the caduceus, which is the medical symbol, that's the 2 snakes that are intertwined on Mercury's staff. But in the older version, in the 12 labors of Hercules, because he didn't die when she wanted to kill him. So what she did is she sent him out on these 12 labors. And one of the labors is he's fighting the Hydra. And the Hydra, for those who don't know what that is a many-headed snake that every time you cut off its head, it grows 2 heads in its place. And of course, if it bites you, it'll kill you. All right. And he's half mortal. So what does she do? And this is actually not my story, but this is Michael Myers' story, who wrote Humanistic Astrology, used to be in Berkeley, and I'm giving his name, but I remember this from a lecture he gave. And he said, so in this, he said, in this particular story, what happens is she wants to kill Hercules, but he keeps knocking these things out and knocking them things out. And so what happens is Hera sends the Cancer crab out to keep nipping at his heels, nipping at his heels, nipping at his heels. And finally, he just stomps on the crab. And Michael Meyer, what he said, and I thought this was brilliant, was that this is the symbolism of the obsessive compulsive disorder. So when you stomp out the Cancer crab, which is feelings, when you don't allow your feelings to come back into your being, you have compulsion. And I thought this was a fascinating story, but it's also, there's a very healing energy about this. So I know that's kind of going off topic a little bit, but, think about this. I mean, the myths are beautiful. I mean, they're just beautiful. And I always like to integrate them into all my classes because I think it helps people understand it. But if anybody ever says anything about the 13th sign, that's what it is. And it happens every year. It activates this time every year.
Georgia, may I ask a question or two?
Sure.
Okay. So is there a 13th sign? It goes around that shows up in the news. And then everyone goes, oh, astrology's bunk because there's really 13 signs, not 12. So what do you say to that?
I think that they're nuts. And I think they bring out the same article every so many years, but the original zodiac was the 12. It's the ring of animals, except for Virgo, who's not an animal, which is very interesting, and Libra, which is a symbol. But no, but I think Ophiuchus plays a part this time of this week, every time we have the first few degrees. And I don't know exactly how. I don't know if anybody's done research on that, but no, I think there's still 12 signs of the zodiac.
Okay. And how do we take the story of Hercules or the energy of Ophiuchus and apply it in our lives? Like, what is it actually, how might it show up for us, and how do we work with that particular?
I think that's a very good question. See, you're so good at this. You're so good at asking the right questions. Well, basically, and Michael Myers said it, is that when you keep stomping out your feelings, if you don't allow them in, then it's very difficult to function on a day-to-day basis without being compulsive. And so, maybe you go to a group to help you talk about your emotions, or maybe you take a big risk and talk about a feeling. Somebody might stomp on your feelings, but at least you said it, and you have to be ready. People will stomp on feelings, but if you don't ask it, you're just as frustrated, And I had a wonderful teacher years ago who used to say that, because, I used to, being a Pisces, I used to struggle with feelings. I still do, sort of. And he said something to me that when you want to say something to somebody about how they made you feel, you would say this: when you did this, ... I felt like this, ... and I really wish you had done this, ... And I think that's a good way to do it. It's not confrontational. It's taking a risk emotionally. They might say, screw you, I don't want to talk to you. Okay, well, then you know who you're dealing with. Or, oh my God, I didn't realize it. And I think that's the Hercules energy. I think that's healing when when you open up the parts of you that you're protecting. We're coming from Scorpio, which doesn't like to be vulnerable. And I think you can be very powerful if you allow your vulnerabilities in. So that said.
Yeah, I love what you said earlier too about asking questions without malice, because that it's sort of the same energy that you just brought into when you're expressing your feelings. It's not loaded, with a bunch of aggressive energy. When you are asking a question from true curiosity, why do you think? I'm sincerely curious to understand why you think that, because I'd like, I see it so different, but I'd really like to understand the way you're seeing it. And it just takes the loaded out, and then I feel like real conversation can happen. And this is like what you're talking about with the feelings. If you, hey, when this happened, I felt like this, and I was hoping you would have done this, but this is what happened. This is how it made me feel, and I just wanted to let you know about that.
And then I think you have a heart connection with somebody. I mean, it's kind of like asking somebody a very simple question without malice. When they're lying to you. I mean, I do. Maybe a lot of people don't, but I've got a pretty good scan for that now. Because you'll feel it. You don't have to know. You'll just feel something's not right inside your system. And that, I think maybe a good thing to try this week as a piece of homework. I always like to give homework every week, right? So is just try it with one person this week. If you've been needing to talk to somebody and if you have the opportunity, don't be afraid, because I think you're going to be protected, and we'll talk about how that plays out when we go to the next slide, but we're not at the next slide yet. And it may take a while for the person to get back to you. And that's what this slide is about. Because as I mentioned a little earlier, Mercury, which is communications, Venus, which is what you desire, and Mars, which is your motivation, they are, boom, most of them are out of bounds. I mean, on the 24th, Mercury's going out of bounds. Now, there's some schools of thought that, by the way, what is out of bounds? Probably people are asking me that. It's when planets, not all the planets can do this, but certain planets can. The 23 degrees 26 north or south is how far the sun can go by declination. But other planets can go beyond, which is, okay, you're going beyond the sun. Okay, you can't think of it as being on the other side of the sun, even though it's not necessarily on the other side of the sun. So when Mercury goes out of bounds, some people say, that it's looking for the genius answer. But it may not have it right away because it's out of bounds. It's out in the exterior, out there in the wilderness, looking for an answer. So if you are expressing your feelings to somebody and they just sort of look at you with a blank look, that's not necessarily bad. They might come back, and then not right now. And they'll talk about this down the road. Venus will soon be in December out of bounds, and Mars has been out of bounds since October 22nd. It goes direct in January, but it stays out of bounds all the way through May 5th of next year. That's a lot. That's what, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, 7 months out of a 12-month year that Mars is out of bounds. And when Mars is out of bounds, I mean, it's the Wild West. We really don't know what's going on. I mean, things break or you get the wrong information. And sometimes the information that's coming in is not because there will be things being set into the news and the media about things that aren't true, but sometimes information coming through is true, but we don't see it clearly until Mars really starts coming into bounds on May 5th, 2023. But this week, it's still out of bounds. And what's happening this week, because we're focusing on this week, is that now that the sun is beginning to move into Sagittarius later in the week, over the course of the next few weeks, the sun will be opposite this Mars. So, you're looking for an answer. You're looking for an answer. You may not get the answer right away, or you bought the right washing machine, but then it broke down, or they said it was going to come on Wednesday, but it's not coming till May. These are the things. And what does that mean? Does that mean we get angry? Or does this mean we're learning how to be more patient? I think a lot of us need to learn that. So, it's just a fun thing to work with, but we can go to the next slide. And I'm going to talk a little bit more, another visual. Now, this visual is from Astrology, which is one of my favorite information URLs. And this is their drawing, but, it's a little bit more graphic than what I could do. So out of bounds go out there finding the answers. That's why if you say something to somebody, you're trying to write a contract with somebody or an agreement with somebody, or you're trying to sort through, like I've been in my library, and it just like you get distracted. The phone rings, you don't get back to it till tomorrow, then you have an hour. That is because there's also something going on in the unconscious. Sometimes when we're on a task, we don't work very well. We have to be doing something else while the unconscious works on the answers. And I think that's what a Mercury out of bounds is about, is that things get distracted so you can solve a problem, but you have to be patient, okay? Out of bounds Venuses, you find alternative partnership options. So if you're working on agreements or contracts, or you're going to rent a room and you have a lease coming up, it may be that it needs to be re-examined. Maybe it needs to be rethought. For all of we seniors, we're all going through this Medicare re-up right now. Good time to do that, because Venus also has to do with your money and your cash flow and your liquidity. Reevaluate all that right now. All these things are out of bounds. Find out about things you've been wanting to find out, but you just somehow got distracted and you didn't find out about it. Okay. And then, of course, again, Mars out of bound reevaluates another way to attack problems, or creates alternate strategies for righting wrongs. And so I'm hopeful with this, because this means that over the next few months, it might be kind of wiry or rough with all the political situation that's going on, but that doesn't mean that solutions are not being found. So that's all I'll say about that. So let's go to my last slide, I think, which is my favorite slide, which is always the way to finish when you're talking with a class. Wednesday, after the new moon, which is new beginnings, Jupiter will finally go direct. Now, I wanted to share this with you because Diana Rosenberg, who's gone now, she dedicated over 50 years of her life on fixed stars. And fixed stars don't move, they never move. Everything else moves, but the fixed stars don't. And they're in all the constellations, not all of them, but they're in quite a few. And one of the things about the last degrees of the zodiac, 28, 29 degrees Pisces, where Jupiter is stationing at 28 degrees Pisces and not really going into Aries until December 20th. So we're looking at Wednesday, November 23rd, all the way through December 20th, where Jupiter will be sitting, because it's kind of revving up. When the planet goes direct and it's a slower planet, it's kind of getting its motor going, right? But it happens to be going direct on Shiat. Now, a lot of astrologers don't like Shiat because if you could call it something else, which I won't do because this is a public forum that you can figure it out. They don't like Shiat. They say it's a troublemaker. And I always thought that was true too. And in many ways, maybe it is, because it's a toxic waste management star, because it is the last degree of the zodiac, which is what Pisces is all about. It's about toxic waste management. you know, garbage in, garbage out, purification. All right. But what Diana told me when she was alive, she said it falls in my favorite constellation in the sky, by the way, in Pegasus. And Pegasus was one of the few winged horses that flew the heroes to heaven. That's important, considering Pluto is also finishing in Capricorn the next few months. And she said that in the sky, if you look at the constellations, Pegasus is flying over Andromeda, who is the chained woman. The sea monster is coming to take her, and she'll be saved eventually. But this is Pegasus. And she said what that star means, where Jupiter will be going direct and staying at that degree all the way through end of December, is freedom from bondage. You know, it's above the chained woman, freedom from bondage. And I remember when I heard that, I was so grateful, because I actually had a planet there, and I always thought it was a horrible degree. And all of a sudden, when she gave me that new perspective, see, all you have to do is have somebody just change your lens like 45 degrees. It made me see things in a very different way than I used to see Shiat. And so that's the theme of this week. And the thing about planets, especially the slow ones like Jupiter, when a planet is beginning to turn direct, you know, folks, planets don't really go backwards. It's just that they look like they're going backwards. But when a slow planet like Jupiter or Saturn or Uranus is turning to go direct, you start feeling it like a few days or maybe even a week before, where you feel that the engine is going, but it's like it wants to move like a hamster in a cage, and it's going faster and faster, but it's not going anywhere. And then it shows up. And then the next day you feel like there's this great relief the next day. And so wherever Jupiter in your own particular charts is going direct is where, after several months of debating what to do with that area of your life, now you start to get some clear landscape, the beginning of a clear landscape. But part of it is you have to free yourself from some sort of bondage. It could be as simple as cleaning out a closet, you know, things you're holding on to. It could be, frankly, where people who have been in very serious illnesses will be freed, you know, especially with Pluto at the end of Capricorn the next few months. It could be just deciding. I mean, Jupiter is about deciding, intelligently deciding, I don't need this and that anymore. And it's I think it's Jupiter's protective. And so I always say to people, sometimes when we think when we think too much, we don't make very good decisions. But if we go inside and we feel what it feels like red flags or a lot of intestinal anxiety, then you know something's wrong. Because that's, you know, before people had language, they had their bodies and there was no language. You only felt what was going on. And I think we kind of sometimes sidestep that because we're in our heads too much. And I think that this is also freedom from maybe it's the freedom, that's the other thing, from the freedom from being fearful that if you say something that really means something to you, that it doesn't matter anymore what people will think. And being protected in that decision. I think that's key.
I love the reminder, Georgia, to feel what you're feeling in your body. I think what I've noticed in myself, especially, is when I'm maybe online all day, or I'm looking at information, or I'm working, I get up in my head, and there's actually a conscious decision to get back in my body, which usually requires turning off the devices, like stopping and being still and breathing and just being. And then it's like, oh God, I'm hungry, or
like real stuff, right?
That didn't feel good when that happened today, or, you know, and if we never allow ourselves that moment, it's just we accumulate all of these experiences and thoughts and feelings. And there's and like you said, that Pisces, what'd you say, toxic waste
management station. See, I call Pisces I can do that because I am a Pisces, so I say it. We're the toxic waste management station. That's the part of the zodiac that has to do with purification.
Wow.
Ultimate, where you clean things out. And that's also the key thing, you know, You're not supposed to be attached to the process. In other words, if you're enabling somebody, stop enabling them so they can get well, because then we can go into a whole discussion, which I discovered in client work many years ago, that if you keep trying to fix other people, or, helping somebody you really love who's not getting any better, you're going to have to come back if you believe in that sort of thing, and they're going to have to come back. So why not just lovingly disconnect? And that's part of freedom from the bondage of your own inability to set boundaries. I think that's very,
Well, and doesn't Pisces also have the, like, quote unquote savior complex? Like it's this feeling that you're responsible to save everyone or save the person. It's like, well, maybe the person needs to save themselves. And yes, we can be compassionate and be great friends to people and great partners for people, but saving
that's not it. That's not going to work.
Right.
But I think as a younger Neptunian type, you'll do that. I think that's what we learn as we go along, as being a Pisces person, not to sidestep this week's work. But I think with Jupiter at the last degrees of Pisces, it's really about, how do I feel also physically? And like you said, in the body, am I exhausted? Why am I exhausted? Is it because I'm not getting any sleep, or is it because too many people are depending upon me that really need to start depending upon themselves, Or it could be saying you can't be involved in an organization anymore for which you've outgrown it, Or parts of my business, if you're looking at the business world, parts of my business are not working. I love that part of the business, but it's not working. It's a lot of work. I'm exhausted doing it, I mean, everybody will experience a different experience of Jupiter going direct at these degrees. I would also say, if you do know your charts, also look at the house where Sagittarius is. That's a rulership thing. And what I might do in next year's program, I might do a rulership workshop for my masterclass, because I think that would be a great way for people to understand another level of this without being too complicated. Because wherever Sagittarius is in the chart, that's also ruled by Jupiter. So Jupiter going direct in your Pisces house for it is also kind of pushing forward your Sagittarius house. So that means, if we're going to just talk generally, that this week, as Jupiter is going direct, all the mutable people, the people with a lot of Pisces, a lot of Gemini, a lot of Sag, a lot of Virgo, you might be making some major decisions about major parts of your life, like your career, your relationship, your health, your home. The fixed people, the Tauruses, a lot of Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Leo, Aquarius and Leos, will probably, I know this off the top of my head, but I just have to check my notes here. They'll be experiencing it, making decisions about their financial lives and how they need to change their financial stuff so that they have more freedom for creativity or working with organizations or in the community. And then those people with a lot of cardinal energy, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, where they're going to be having this forward, if you will, this forward kind of motion, would be in their, maybe they want to take a class. Maybe they want to learn something new. Maybe they want to clean out their databases, get organized so you're ready, dress for the party when the party starts, when Mars goes direct in January and catches up in May. So those are the thoughts.
Okay, couple questions, and then I'll do a little summary of some of the things that you talked about that really jumped out at me. In the beginning, in that graphic that you showed of the locomotive, that the visual for the planetary movement this week is that locomotive.
Right.
And you said that it's having us focus on something. What is it having us focus on?
First, the emotions, because the moon leads first, and family, which is perfect. And then within a couple of days, starting around Wednesday, then the sun goes in the lead position, and that's the heart. It's also the creative process. It's also the planet that has to do with speculation, taking a gamble, children of the body, children of the mind.
Amazing. Georgia, I just learned so much in that very short period of time. You're an incredible teacher and just a endless wealth of information, but also wisdom. And it's awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I love that you took the extra step to actually make a presentation for us. And again, if you love Georgia's teaching style and you love the visuals and actually having a presentation about the energy, that's what we do in the inner circle. So Georgia will be an inner circle astrologer next year. The new moon and the full moon, you get an actual presentation from your teacher. And it's explaining why they're saying what they're saying so that you can start to interpret these things, that you don't always have to be told what's happening astrologically, that you can start to translate the energies yourself. So again, that's not open right now, but make sure you're in the wait list if you're interested in joining so that you get to join during that one little window that we're going to open up before the end of the year. And then we open it up again in March. So astrologyhub.com/IC23 is the wait list. All right. So Georgia, in terms of recap, we have darkness to light is the theme. And this is an emotional beginning. You said, so, you know, we have a new moon happening. There's beginnings, there's new beginnings. I love what you said about the new moon and how we're more willing to take risks because we don't know that much.
To have the experience, right?
And it reminds me of what happens when we do new moon ceremonies in the inner circle as well, and we do intention setting. And normally my intentions, you know, they're very bold. And it is with that energy of like, I don't know what I don't know yet. I don't know what that intention will bring. So it's like easy to be bold about it. And then by the end of the moon cycle, it's like, oh, okay, I see what I'm actually going to have to do to bring that into fruition. And am I really up for that? Like, and sometimes yes, and sometimes no. So I love that. Okay. So you said that there could be a sense of frustration because we can't get things done. And I think this is the retrograde energy. But you said to focus on just getting one or two things done. So every day, like if you can just, instead of having your list of 10 things, be like the one thing that I can get done today that would actually make an impact. Yeah.
Yeah. And if I can interject here, what I failed to say was, since it is Sagittarius, which rules the thighs and the circulation system, also, if you're finding yourself getting off task, if you can walk, some people can't, but at least get outside. You know, Sagittarius is Artemis in the wilderness with her dogs, you know, take a walk, you know, go get some fresh air, because the air, Mercury, feeds the brain, and you'll get off task, and then you come back and you have a better answer. So didn't mean to interrupt, but I failed to say that. So
interrupt anytime. Okay. So a couple other things that we have Thanksgiving in the United States this year.
And happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, yes. Which is a Jupiter celebration, really. I love reframing that one as an astrological holiday, because then everyone everywhere can celebrate it. It's not just the United States. And it's really a celebration of all things Jupiterian, which includes like the cornucopia of abundance of food and friends and family. And so gratitude. But one of the things you said is that we're potentially going to be around family, and to not throw darts, to really think before we speak, to get centered in ourselves emotionally before we even overindulge. And sometimes if I know that I'm going to be having a glass of wine or whatever, I will literally set intentions beforehand for how I want to how I want to be no matter what. You know, I'm going to still be kind. I'm going to still be generous. I'm still going to be grateful. And that way, sometimes the alcohol can sort of cloud judgment or cloud.
Yeah, I think and there'll be a lot of that this holiday season, I think, with Mars, Neptune. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And Jupiter, and also with Jupiter with Neptune and Mars. I mean, it's a lot of food and a lot of drink, a lot of alcohol, you know, a lot.
A lot. Okay, so we also have a lot of planets out of bounds, and I learned a ton about out of bounds today. So this is basically each one, Mars, Mercury, and Venus, they have kind of different flavors when they're out of bounds. But you said Mars out of bounds is like the wild, wild west, like we don't really know what we're going to get. Mercury out of bounds as we're waiting for a genius answer. I
Mhm.
actually didn't write down Venus out of bounds. What would be the one little line for Venus out of bounds?
We're really reevaluating what we really desire. I think that's it. Venus wants what she wants she wants what she wants when she wants. But when she's out of bounds, it's like, do I really want that?
Mhm.
You know, and in a way it's kind of good, really. But it also can be, you know, there's a disconnect from relationships a little bit because she's not really in the bounds.
Mm.
You know, she's kind of out there doing her thing, you know.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay. So you said to be mindful of the media that we're ingesting. You said
Yes.
you reminded us to ask questions without malice. You also mentioned that this might be a good time to do some of the things that you've been too distracted to do over the last couple of months. Like this will be a good time to get some of those things done. You did a great explanation of the fixed stars and this Shiat. With, if you're listening on the podcast, you're probably like, what are we actually saying here? It's SCHEAT, Shiat. And I love that you brought in the Pegasus, jumping over the woman that's in bondage, and brought in this idea that we have to free ourselves from bondage first before we can feel that sense of freedom, and deciding what you don't need anymore. So there's certain things you might not need anymore. So really getting clear on what is it I don't need anymore in order to move forward. You said that maybe freedom from being fearful of what others think, free yourself from bondage before you.
And that was Diana Rosenberg's take on Shiat, that because most traditional astrology, I mean, even all the books will say Shiat has completely opposite. It's a dark star, you know, there's other words that sound like it, you know, it's garbagey, shall we say. And but when she said that to me, I thought, well, that's what Pisces is about, cleaning out the garbage, right? You know, so if you can just reframe it and think, okay, it's toxic waste management, you're freeing yourself from bondage.
Well, and thankfully someone does that. Like whether
somebody has to do it.
It happens, or else we'd be surrounded in it. So thankfully that function exists, whether it's in the body or in the fixed stars, whatever it is. At least we have someone focused on that, and it is a good thing. But I also love what you're bringing up here as an example of the power of a shift in perspective, and how that can actually change the way you relate with something, and make it a healthier relationship instead of something that it's like feared or you know, undesired. Like, well, actually maybe we need that, maybe that's good, and maybe thankfully that frees us from bondage so that we can experience what the Pegasus experiences, which is the free flight, you know. So
and the other thing with the other thought I'm having, which is true, with, you know, strong Mars, people who have strong Mars in their charts, Aries people, or Mars on the angle, one of the big lessons is listening. They don't always listen. When Mars is going through Gemini without being retrograde, a lot of talking going on, not a lot of listening, okay? But Mars retrograde, it's about listening. You know, really trying, and it's not comfortable because it leaves a lot of empty open spaces and time, but because Gemini wants to be busy, right? But it's okay. What, you know, how do I fill this? I every time you have a dark thought, say something that you're grateful for. I mean, that's a good remedy for that.
I noticed even in your speaking style, your teaching style, that you do leave pauses, and it's awesome. It leaves this space to digest what you just said and to really sit with the impact of the words. And that's true of music too, right? I mean, some of the beautiful, delicious moments are when not that much is happening or nothing's happening.
Right.
So, yeah, I love you bringing that in too, that this Mars retrograde may create more white space or pauses in the action, but what's in that pause? You know, what can we like eke out of that moment? I love it. Thank you, Georgia. This has been so awesome. I love it so much. I always learn so much from you. I hope that everybody else got to feel that too and experience that too. So excited you're going to be with us for the Inner Circle and some other really cool things in 2023, which I can't tell you all about yet, but we're going to be seeing lots of Georgia, and that is very good news. A reminder to sign up for the forecast event. It's totally free, happening December 10th, featuring the panel event is featuring 6 astrologers, and then you'll be hearing from other astrologers throughout the week, going through the personalized read of the year ahead by sign. So you'll get some more specific information for you based on your horoscope. Check that out. That's astrologyhub.com/2023 forecast. Can't wait to see you all at that. Georgia, can't wait to do more and more with you. And just thank you again for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And again, have a good holiday season, all of you.
You too. All right. Thanks everybody for being here. Thank you so much for being a part of our community. And thank you as always for making astrology a part of your life. We'll catch you on the next episode.
My first astrology reading literally changed my life. I was in the midst of a significant dark night of the soul, and that reading gave me the hope and confidence that I needed to continue on my path, no matter how challenging things were. I've had the pleasure of seeing the impact that a high-quality reading can have on thousands of our community members. This is why we at Astrology Hub have been working so hard to create a platform where you can find and book astrology readings with the most trusted and experienced astrologers in the world. We've created a new platform called Astrologer Connect, and we've been testing it with our Inner Circle members with great success. So I'm inviting you to get on the waitlist now so you can be first to book when we do open the platform. You can go to astrologyhub.com/readings and secure your spot today. I can't wait to hear your story after you've had the chance to consult with one of our amazing astrologers, many of whom you've met here on the podcast. Getting on the waitlist is completely free and it doesn't bind you to anything. Go to astrologyhub.com/readings today.